As the mayor of the town of Clayton, I'd like to call this Clayton Town Council meeting to order. I ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Most gracious and heavenly Father, we pause to give you thanks for the many blessings of this day, Lord, and we ask now that you be with us as we proceed with the business for the town of Clayton. For it's in your great name we pray. Amen. The first order of business this evening is to hold a public hearing regarding the proposed Neuse River water reclamation facility. This meeting is required by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, and tonight we will have a presentation from our consultant, followed by a public hearing.
There it goes.
Mm-hmm. All right, now we're ready to get started. Thank you, Mayor, for the introduction. I'm Jamie Robinson with Jacobs, and as part of the firm that's been helping the town, we'll talk a little bit about the reason we're here tonight. So again, as the mayor mentioned, this public meeting is being held as part of a requirement with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. This project has partial funding through the Division of Water Infrastructure. And the reason the town has been embarked on this planning for years is because with growth needs, both residential and industrial, the town is ready to move on to its next step. And so as part of that requirement, tonight we're here for this public meeting, and an engineering report and an environmental impact document were prepared as part of the project. And so that full document is available for the public's review at the library, and links are available to the full electronic version of the report on the state's website, or on the town's website. So an overview of the project. Again, the town has been planning for its wastewater treatment capacity future for over a decade now, and currently the town's wastewater is treated at the Little Creek Water Reclamation Facility on the west side of the town, labeled as the LCWRF on the map. And it also has interlocal agreements and sends a portion of its wastewater to both the city of Raleigh and to Johnston County. And so as the town moves forward and realizes that it needs additional wastewater treatment capacity, the town is moving forward with plans to build a new treatment facility. And so this plan provides resiliency for the town, capacity for growth moving forward, and offers an opportunity to better protect the environment. So the first part of the engineering report is to define why we're here, or the project need and purpose. And so again, Clayton is a growing town, and as part of that, we must increase its treatment capacity. And the current facility, while well-maintained, is nearing the end of its useful life and would require some investment to make some improvements. And so with the need for those improvements, as well as the agreements with Johnston County and the city of Raleigh nearing their expiration dates, again, it was time for the town to prepare its next steps moving forward. And so in doing so, our planning projections say that there's a need for 6 million gallons, or MGD, of capacity in the near future. And the long-term plans for the town and the projections show that that need could grow up to 10 million gallons per day. Right now, the town discharges, or the Little Creek facility discharges into the Neuse River on town-owned property that also houses the Neuse 2 and Clayton to Raleigh pump stations. And so the town is proposing to make additional use of that site by constructing a new water reclamation facility, or you'll hear us call it the WRF, on that property. And so to support that plan moving forward, again, an engineering report and environmental impact document, we're prepared to support that. And that document requires that you follow state guidance in its preparation. And so we'll go over what's included in that. Again, a definition of the project need and purpose. So we looked at the town's growth projections, and we also looked at the town's current infrastructure, as well as its interlocal agreements. We looked at a variety of alternatives that we'll talk about more tonight in a minute, both from an engineering perspective and from an environmental impact perspective. And then once the preferred alternative was selected, we did a deeper dive into the potential environmental impacts and found that the project has no potential for significant environmental impacts. And what that means is the town is asking for the state to support that with a finding of no significant impact. Other words, the acronym for that is a FONSI. So you may hear that term used in describing the project. As part of that, public involvement is required, and the town held an information session on the project back in July. And again, we're having this public meeting tonight, and we'll talk more about ways to get engaged in that public comment period at the end of the presentation. And here's the website that you'll see again for how you can access the electronic version of that document on the town's website. In addition to that, you're also required to discuss the costs of the project and what that means to the rate impacts. And then there's additional environmental permitting and other state agency permitting required that are also addressed in the document. So from an alternatives perspective, we looked at a handful of options, and the preferred alternative after both an engineering evaluation and a high-level environmental impact assessment led us to determine that the preferred alternative is the construction of a new water reclamation facility that would have 6 million gallons a day of capacity and continue to use the current location of the Neuse River discharge on town-owned property. And other items that were required to be considered, what's called the no action alternative, which just means you maintain the status quo. Expansion of the current facility, the Little Creek Water Reclamation Facility. Construction of a new facility. And we also looked at another site nearer the industrial area of town. Maximizing use of regional partnerships with Johnston County and the city of Raleigh. And then we also looked at, as the state requires, we looked at other discharge alternatives as well. The Neuse River Basin has an environmental program in place to reduce nutrient loading into the river. And so one of the mitigation steps of this project was also to purchase what's called nitrogen credits to reduce nutrient loading into the river. So again, part of the state required discharge alternatives that we looked at were the use of land application, large-scale wastewater reuse, a decentralized system, and the optimum operation of existing facilities. And so none of these were considered practically feasible, and so they did not make it into the final option. So next, we're going to review the alternatives that were considered as part of the project. And again, the no action or maintain the status quo option is the first alternative that's required. And so that would keep the Little Creek Water Reclamation Facility in operation. And built in the 50s, this facility is now susceptible, a portion of the property is susceptible to flooding, especially in recent decades. And the incoming conveyance line has some issues associated with it as well. And so the state recently obtained a grant, or the town obtained a grant from the state of North Carolina to look at an asset inventory, and the findings of that showed that investment would be needed in the near term to keep that plant in operation. So that's not even talking about expansion, that's just to maintain the status quo, investment would be necessary. The other thing that's going on right now is the agreements that the town currently has in place with the city of Raleigh and Johnston County are changing and getting more expensive. And so, in short, the no action alternative does not provide the town the capacity that it needs moving forward. So what happened if we took that same facility and we expanded it to meet those growth projections that we talked about? Again, the facility has some flooding issues and investment would be required to even bring it up to standard to operate in the near future. Plus, on top of that, you would have the cost of the expanded infrastructure. So the site, from a cost perspective, is not the preferred alternative for the town. It doesn't meet the long-term or the short-term needs without significant investment. So considering a brand new facility and the benefits that that would bring to the town, we looked at two site options. One, the preferred one along the Neuse River, and this one, which would be near or within the East Clayton Industrial Area, or the ECIA, part of the research and training zone. And what that would do is that would give you an opportunity to be nearer some of the industrial locations in this town, but you would still have to pump the wastewater a long way from there to the discharge in the Neuse River. There's costs associated with that. There's wetland impacts at the site, and you would have a loss of recreational use. And that site being smaller would also limit potential expansions in the future. So this site was also removed from further consideration. So when we look more closely at the preferred alternative, or referred to as the new Neuse River Water Reclamation Facility, the town's discharge is there right now into the Neuse River, and the site access would be off North O'Neill Street. And again, the site currently houses wastewater infrastructure for the town with the Neuse 2 and Clayton to Raleigh pump stations. And then also included on the property are portions of the Sam Branch Greenway and the Clayton Riverwalk. They're along sort of the southeast and the northeast portions of the site. There's also a power substation and high voltage power lines that go through the property. So there are significant industrial uses there now. So as part of the development of the engineering report and environmental impact document, we did a deep dive in planning process to lay out the facility. First, we assessed the environmental conditions on the site, understood where the streams and their buffers were, where the floodplains were, and other environmental considerations. And we designed the layout of the proposed facility to avoid as many impacts as we could to the site. So that has many benefits in the first place, is avoiding those impacts. And as part of that, a new access road would be needed into the property from North O'Neill Street. And in doing that, we would also add a water line to provide water access to the property. The other part of the project would involve getting flows that currently now go to the Little Creek Water Reclamation Facility over to the new Neuse River Water Reclamation Facility. And so what would happen is on the current plant property, a pump station would be built to pump that wastewater over to the new plant. And then we would need a transmission main to get that flow from point A to point B. And in doing so, there is a pipe there now, the discharge that goes to the Neuse River. So we would be able to access that existing easement as much as possible to, again, further minimize impacts to the town. So how else are we protecting the environment with this project? Again, we're seeking a finding of no significant impact or a FONSI from the state for the project. And in doing so, we believe that there are no significant impacts associated with both the construction and the operation of a new facility for the town. And so the benefits of building a new facility include the opportunity to use new treatment technologies to reduce nutrient loading into the river, constructing the facility entirely outside the floodplain, again, avoiding stream and floodplain areas on the site. And as part of that site assessment, we've had very close coordination with state and federal environmental agencies as part of the project. Part of the state process involves us reaching out to all of those agencies and getting their support. So that process has also been completed. And so as such, we're moving forward with the request for a FONSI. And so the next requirement that's part of the environmental impact document and engineering report is an assessment of how to pay for the project. So the town has been balancing its capital expenses and maximizing its agreements with its regional partners for a decade. But now as the town realizes its near-term need for additional capacity, it's time to take on this next step. And in doing so, the town has worked closely with the local government commission, and they've required agreements with the two largest industrial customers to show that there's commitment there for the project. And Novo Nordisk and Grifols have made those commitments when asked. And so the current estimates say that the cost could exceed $120 million. And to be fiscally responsible, the town has applied for a low interest loan from the state revolving fund and are following those processes. And so the first step was an award of $30 million towards that $120 million. And that low interest loan is step one. The town expects to apply in additional years for additional funds from the state revolving fund. They've also been approved by the local government commission for borrowing $15 million for the nitrogen credits and other site remediation in preparation for the new plant, and supporting other aspects of the project through the sale of revenue bonds and capital funds. And so what does that mean when we start talking about customer bill information? Again, the town has undergone significant planning for this. They prepared a water and sewer CIP financial plan, and in doing so, projected the amount of revenue that the town would need to bring into its utility department to pay for these capital projects. And in doing so, Town Council has supported that effort in improving or supporting and implementing rate increases over the last 2 fiscal years, with the goal and the expectation that all ratepayers will pay their fair share. And so right now, the current residential water and sewer bill, if you looked at a typical 5,000 gallon per month bill, would be $83.58. The portion of that that's applied to the sewer bill or the sewer costs is $45.73. And so the town has worked hard with a goal of needing revenue increases of less than 10% every year for the next few years to pay for the project. In 2023, costs are shown here because the goal for the town is to have this new water reclamation facility online in 2023. And so in doing so, the estimated water and sewer bill per 5,000 gallons would be $111.51, and the sewer portion of that bill would be $71.35. And again, while these rates are going up, the town is also partially doing that because costs from the city of Raleigh and Johnston County are going up at a higher percentage than that. And so in doing so, the town is trying to be fiscally responsible for its ratepayers. So when we talk about the next steps as part of this process, The town has already this year purchased nitrogen credits as part of their National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit. And that NPDES permit modification is also currently out for public comment right now and is available on the state's website. After we hold this public meeting, the state will publish the environmental document and the engineering report, as well as their written finding of no significant impact, or their FONSI, in the North Carolina Clearinghouse, and that'll be available. That's the public comment period will be open when that happens. And so the town anticipates, for both timing reasons and cost benefits, to pursue a design build approach for the project. And so that'll be the next step in terms of building the facility if all approvals are in place, and then also working on the design of linear infrastructure needed for the project. So the goals are to break ground on the new facility in 2021, continue to seek funding opportunities through the state revolving fund and other sources as we move forward, and then in 2023, having the new facility online. And so during construction, the current Little Creek Water Reclamation Facility and the regional agreements with Johnston County and the city of Raleigh will remain in operation. And then those agreements, after the facility is online, will be used more on an emergency basis. So in summary, the benefits to the town of Clayton and its customers from this project approach are to meet the near term and prepare for the long-term capacity needs of the town for wastewater treatment, replace aging infrastructure at the Little Creek Water Reclamation Facility, and have a facility that is resilient in that it's built outside the floodplain and that it's better situated to remove nutrients to protect the Neuse River. And again, the greenways that are part of the property will remain in operation in the long term. And again, the town will continue to have its interlocal agreements with Raleigh and Johnston County, and they'll transition to more of a emergency and resiliency option for the town instead of being relied upon because of those increased costs associated with those agreements. So that'll well prepare the town for decades to move forward, for decades to come. So as part of this public meeting, there is the opportunity for public comment tonight. And then the written comments can also be prepared and submitted to the town. The email address to do that is on the screen. There's also flyers in the lobby with that information, or written comments can be sent to the address shown here to Richard Capola at the town. And we'll assemble all of those and keep in close coordination with the state as it moves forward for the 30 days that it's advertised in the North Carolina Clearinghouse. So that concludes the presentation portion of the public meeting. And at this point, if there's any comments, I'll turn it back over to the town.
We do have some people in the lobby that are going to be coming in now to offer public comment. Heidi, could you meet them at the door? Thank you. On my list, I have Chuck Blatchley. Are you going to be offering comments? Yes. Okay, please step forward.
So, good evening. to our elected officials, the town's leadership team, its engineers, and citizens of Clayton. My name is Chuck Blatchley, and I'm an engineering director at Grifols Therapeutics. And I've been working at that site, making life-saving medicines for about 29 years now. And I've had the great pleasure to see that site grow, to see this town grow, and the county grow. And when I say grow, man, I mean grow like crazy. I'm thinking back 30 years ago, and I look at it today, and it's hard to believe. Grifols continues to grow its flagship site here in Clayton, and to do so needs the town and the county to grow along with us, as you have in the past, especially in the infrastructure area, and more specifically, what we're talking about tonight in wastewater treatment. These biotech businesses are very intense when it comes to water treatment. The Clayton, or the Grifols facility that I work at, right now is looking to upgrade our facility to build a pretreatment plant, and it's not going to cost as much as the town's 6 million gallon per day plant. We're looking at going to 2 million gallons per day, but we'll probably spend in the neighborhood of 40, 50, 60 million dollars just for a pretreatment plant. So we are dedicated to continuing what we're doing and to continue to grow. So we encourage the town to move forward with this proposed wastewater treatment plant. And for that, Grifols and its patients are very appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Griffiths.
Weiss?
I'm just coming in on the tail end of this. Thank you for letting me have a comment about what's been presented. I think it's obviously very needed when you look at the substantial growth that's been going on over the years here in Clayton. And many of you have been here a lot longer than I have, and you've seen what needs to be done. The issue at stake that I have to have a question about is when it comes to funding. I looked at the numbers that were just presented, and the raw math says in 2023, it's going to be about a 57% increase over what residential customers are paying today for their wastewater. Does that sound right to you all? Okay, you're nodding, so I'm assuming that's correct. So when I look at that, I say to myself, okay, what are other communities in the United States doing today? And one of the things that they're doing is they're allowing developers to contribute to the infrastructure. I didn't see any of that in the presentation. It looked like the funding was through government sources, low interest loans, and the citizenry of Clayton. Did I miss anything? Was there anything supposed to be for the developers who will be coming in later on to make the town bigger and better? I didn't see any of that, did you?
I'll let our consultant answer, but one of the things I'd say for all users, they pay into the system to be part of it, what's called system development fees.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so they will pay those system development fees, which will not pay for the total cost of their share.
Right.
But everybody pays an equal amount to be in the system, if you will.
Yeah, and I guess that's where the kind of the rub lies, is that these developers come in, they make wonderful structures, they build subdivisions, developments, apartment complexes, make their money, and they leave. And what's left is the citizenry then now has to pay the higher rates because these guys were allowed to come in and do the developing. What many places in the United States are doing are actually asking the developers to contribute through a fund to pay for the infrastructure growth so that the citizenry can pay the regular nominal rates that they've been enjoying for years. Right. So I would like to ask that be considered for future, to somehow develop a program that we could have the developers participate in a much greater degree than leaving it all upon us as the citizens to pay the 50 to 60% increase over the development, because we don't, as a citizen, we don't gain anything from this wonderful development. When you put an apartment complex in in a section of town, or you build a 200 housing subdivision, the citizens don't get anything other than the fact is they get to buy a home in that area, but now they have to pay a much higher increase.
So, and I would just say that we have to look at all our customers and their proportional share, so we can't, and we don't go after people in different ways.
Yeah.
One of the things we are allowed to do is look at in-town customers versus out-of-town customers.
Okay.
In different ways, and we do, but across our customer classes, we try to treat everybody the same, and that's our legal charge. And I think not to defend or to bash the development, but one of the things we're all getting out of this plan is our plant's worn out. It really is, and we need to really do something better for the environment. We're in nutrient-sensitive waters in the Neuse, and all our citizens are going to be benefiting over the next 50 or 60 years from this kind of facility.
I totally agree, and I see the difference. When we talk about substantial infrastructure for industry, such as for Grifols, it makes great sense to be able to lure that type of business into our area. But then when you look at also the high amount of development that went in, as we know, in Riverwood and in all that area, for example, built by Fred Smith, that's been a huge increase in the population base.
Yeah.
And nobody's really shared in those increases other than hookup fees, and that's it. That doesn't pay for all the things that now we're having to come back to address.
Yeah, and we're trying, and we hear your comment, and we will address that, and that'll be one of our comments that we do address of how we're trying to do that from all our citizens. I'll say this with respect to Grifols and big entities like Novo or Caterpillar.
Yeah.
Some of the largest one here are Grifols and Novo. Novo's been here almost 30 years.
Yep.
Grifols by different names, but also probably more than 30. And so when you look at the prosperity of Clayton and all the things, we are just very fortunate as a community to have those type of entities. And there's others that have been here such a long haul. So for the citizens, one of the things that I say in this is there's not a lot of speculation in what we're adding here. We have looked at just the trajectory to get us through the periods that the consultants have said we're looking at.
Yep.
But we have done all that we can to keep the cost of this low and just to meet the demand that is there in the short term that needs to be met. We want to look long, but it really is a build what we can afford, and so we're trying to keep the affordability right. And I'll be quiet because it's time for your comment, not for me to address. But
no, that's good.
Jamie, is that sufficient, or is there anything else you want to say in that?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, again, one of the things that's included in the engineering report is a discussion of that aging infrastructure and how much it costs to replace all of that. And so in turn, there's investment needed on behalf of the town, regardless of what alternative is selected moving forward. It's going to cost, going to raise costs. So
Yeah. But Mr. Weiss, we do appreciate your comment, and as always,
Thank you.
Good perspective. Thank you, sir.
All right, is there anyone else? All right, then if no one else, then we will conclude this
Public meeting.
this public meeting, and thank everyone for your input and for your hard work. And we look forward to moving this project forward. And with that being said, then we will move on to the next item of the
Mr.
agenda.
Mayor, if I can for a second, just to make sure council's aware. The state in this process would like to see the draft minutes of this so they could put this in the North Carolina Register. Jamie may have already said that. I may have missed it. But we will be preparing the minutes of this. All they need is proof of the minutes. We don't have to have them adopted by council. So we will be forwarding that under my signature or under the mayor's signature once the consultants have it done, so that we can get this in the North Carolina Register in the next couple of days. But that is a requirement, but it does not have to be an official vote of this council to approve the proceedings of this meeting that it actually happened tonight. So, sorry, Mr. Mayor, now we're officially dismissed out of the meeting, right?
Thank you. That's great. Thank you, JD. Thank you, everyone. Up next is your consent agenda, and you do not have included in your agenda packet the closed session meetings for November 2nd, 2020. So we will seek your approval for just the regular meeting minutes on November 2nd, 2020.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda just pertaining to the November 2nd, 2020 regular meeting. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. She can't go out the door. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I would have gone right out that door into the great unknown. Thank you for catching that. That was very kind. All right, up next, under public hearing is the code of ordinance adoption of Chapter 158, Stormwater and Erosion. This is a continued public hearing from our November 2nd, 2020 meeting.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Joshua Barrett, Town Engineer. Before we jump into the stormwater ordinance, I do want to just give a quick update, as keep everyone in the council in the loop as far as our proceeding with erosion and sediment control. We last Thursday went before the SCC, the State Sedimentation Control Commission, with the ordinance that was adopted by council, and that was approved. The commission approved our ordinance and approved our delegation beginning January 1, 2021. So exciting news there, and appreciate all the support as far as the erosion and sediment control. So now on to the stormwater ordinance. Last meeting, we gave a briefing over on the ordinance itself and had a public hearing that was continued. We have made some minor changes based on that feedback that we received, and Susan's going to kind of recap and walk us through some of those just brief updates that we had.
Good evening. So when we were here last, we went through the ordinance. There were a few speaking points that we went back and touched on, talked to Catherine to get some input. So what I'm presenting here are just those bullet points that we discussed a couple weeks ago. So again, we're just here to reevaluate the stormwater ordinance and where we go from here. Okay, so this is just background. Again, we're required as part of our NPDS Phase 2 permit to implement a stormwater program. Again, Joshua touched on that we did receive delegation from the Sediment Control Commission, so that's one step forward for us. Again, this came up in the last presentation, we are in the Neuse River Basin, so we do have some nutrient-sensitive waters that we're trying to protect through our development code. I'm not going to read it. Purpose, to protect public health, safety, environment. So one of the talking points that came up at the last meeting was there was discussion about runoff volume match. So when we stepped away and kind of thought about it, I thought, we just didn't make it clear enough. So what we currently require developers to do is they treat their runoff. So they're doing that today. They'll be doing it after January 1, after we implement this ordinance. The state, in rewriting some of their rules and clarifying some things, has given another option and that is the runoff volume match. So we're not requiring anything more than what's already being implemented. We are just giving an option. So I've cited the state statute. It says applicants shall have the option to design projects to achieve runoff volume match in lieu of runoff treatment. So it's one or the other, their choice. So it shouldn't really add any more expense. It's just giving them another method to meet the requirements set forth by the state. The second talking point that we had, there was some discussion regarding an escrow account. And so the more we looked at it, the more we thought about it and how we wanted to implement, we actually revised the section with regard to operation and maintenance, and I'm drawing a blank. An escrow account is still required. It was required before. The difference is we're really not dictating how they establish that. What we had in there before was a developer-funded initial escrow. Here, we're just saying it has to be done. We're reviewing it. We have to be okay with it, but we're not dictating that dollar amount that establishes how that fund gets funded through the course of the years. And then lastly, there was some questions last meeting about the variance and who the petitions would go to. It originally read any person may petition the town. So we just clarified that and identified that to be the town council for variance requests from the stormwater ordinance. Some pretty stormwater devices there for you guys to look at. Do you have, and we're open to questions.
Questions or comments for staff? Mr. Granis?
With respect to the escrow account, by changing the verbiage and eliminating other pieces of that, can you tell me who ultimately should be responsible for an escrow account?
Susan's looking at me. If I might take that, first of all, is my mic working? Try to keep it off. In reviewing the draft that staff brought forward, there were some inconsistencies in the sections on the escrow account. Susan and I sat down and talked about it. Basically, what this ordinance does require an HOA, right? So not an individual citizen, but an HOA that has what we call shared SCM. Has to have an operations and maintenance agreement that is satisfactory to town. Very typical, normal provision. Same from the county perspective right now in their ordinance that an O&M is required. And part of that O&M has to establish and set up an escrow account. So the escrow account is held by the homeowners association. It is not held by the town. It's not funds held by the town. With the way that it's drafted, most likely the way that will work out, but again, it is set up to be reasonably worked through between the parties, is that the town would be identified, I'll say beneficiary is not quite the right word, in the escrow account documentation, because can you put that section back up?
Yes.
Because as you'll note in there, what it says is the funds in the escrow account for stormwater, sorry, it's white, I cannot read it. Have to be, can be dispersed to the town. Thank you, Susan, apologies. Right, so, pardon me. And apologies, maybe it's not in there, maybe it's later in the ordinance, that the funds in the escrow account can be accessed essentially by the town through the escrow agreement. if it mandates and requires repair, as is written in this section, after reasonable notice, enter the land and perform all the necessary work, and may assess the owner of the facility with the cost of the work. So one of the things that the escrow agreement does is allow the town to make a claim on that escrow account if it has to go in and do that work. So one of the ways the county ordinance deals with this is it references a financial instrument, which an escrow account would be, to be determined if required by the county. So my view of this is the mandate that there is an escrow account is slightly different, but the concepts of having the financial security are in alignment with not only the county, but what we see in other jurisdictions.
So one of the notable things that I notice has been stricken is that the developer contribution funds shall fund the escrow account. So am I led to believe that the developer will have no responsibility to fund any segment of that escrow account?
Sure, so the developer will set up the HOA, right? And so the developer will have to work through that issue with itself and the town. And the question will be, how is the escrow account sufficient to satisfy the town? So my expectation would be that a developer would put in a portion of money, and then the HOA restrictive covenants and operating documents would reflect what portion of the HOA dues and assessments would go into that fund, such that there is reasonable support and security for these SCM measures. The reason that striking this to me makes sense is it gives the developer and the town flexibility. So instead of mandating something here in our ordinance, that a developer may have a better idea of how to address it to promote the development. But I do not view this as jeopardizing HOA members, because this is about the new development and new HOAs. And so when that is, before it becomes and turned over to an HOA, and there are people living there and members of the HOA has to be set up. And this is where the town gets to have input in and reasonably content with the governance documents that govern an HOA. We've certainly seen a number of issues where those governance documents aren't as clear as we'd like or as direct as we like. And so this is one area where there should not be a lot of ambiguity about responsibility for the SCMs, both from a maintenance perspective and from a cost perspective.
And if I could add, just for the moment, this is the part of the stormwater program that's not old, but it's what the state's been enforcing over the last couple of years. And when you talk about some of the advantages of us having it under our umbrella versus, say, the county's umbrella, this is something kind of unique to Clayton and the county, and certain that really does impact our homeowners. And if the development, the education piece of this is not done, and this stuff is not done right, it is a huge liability to people. And so by bringing this in-house, there is a cost to that will be there, where we'll have to hire more people to probably educate and help review this. But it is to the advantage of our community, because as the state enforces on us, we need to be proactive and ahead of this curve and not behind it. So I just add that in there too, because these escrows need to be there, even though we don't hold them. But so does the education and the issues that the homeowners are going to have long-term. So I think this is positive, but this is one reason we want to bring our program back in, so we can reach our citizens better.
So is this for new development only, or is it retroactive to existing development and new development?
So this would be for anything with a shared stormwater device, whether it would be new development. Sorry. So it would be for new developments that choose to utilize a shared device, if that's the way that the development is presented.
And I might just add for clarity, this section applies to new development and new HOAs, but there are sections of this ordinance that would apply to new development, or it's new development but expanded development. So it's all new development, but there are two definitions and they're defined by definition in terms of if there are expansions to things that are existing, and then if there's totally new developments.
Okay. There's a statement in here under design manual, which is 158.107, section 2, relationship of design manual to other laws and regulations. If the specifications or guidelines of the design manual are more restrictive or apply a higher standard than other laws or regulations, the fact shall not prevent the application of specifications or guidelines in the design manual. So my question is, how can that statement be defended?
Mr. Granis, one thing, can you make sure you talk into your microphone? Because I'll be honest, I don't know if it's done behind you, I'm having trouble hearing you. So maybe a section reference again will help me.
Section 158-107 Design Manual, Item 2, the relationship of design manual or other laws and regulations. If the specification or guidelines of the design manual are more restrictive or apply a higher standard than other laws or regulations, that fact shall not prevent application of the specifications or guidelines in the design manual. My question is, how is that statement defended if challenged?
It's not, actually. So this may come out of the model ordinance, but it is, I would call it a good catch. And I've got a different hat on that I wear, and we need to do some research into that before we officially adopt that. I don't see it in front of me, but I think we're all looking with eyes that we know that can't be right. The manual can't be override a statute.
Okay.
Most restrictive law would apply.
Yes. That would be the intent, but I don't know why that's confusing that way with the way he read it, because the design manual does not have jurisdiction over a statute or a rule.
No. And the design manuals are updated all the time. I think it's intended to catch the more restrictive law, statute.
Well, technically it's and I'm now an EMC member, it is a policy, it's not a statute or a rule, so.
If I may just jump in for clarification, I know in moving forward, we'll certainly look at that language and make what I call Scribner's error correction if needed. But as Susan said, and apologies, I still couldn't catch the reference. The intent there is the most restrictive of the statutes or rules would govern. And so what they're saying is that if something in the design manual is more restrictive, that doesn't mean the design manual doesn't apply in its totality. The design manual is still applicable, but if it were to be out of compliance, say with a statute that had been passed and such that it was more restrictive, just that rule would not apply, but the design manual in its entirety would still apply.
Okay.
We can work to clarify that language if need be, but that is the intent behind pulling in the design manual as part of the ordinance, but putting it in its right legal place with respect to statutes or other higher authority laws or regulations.
Okay. I get that.
Okay.
Mr. Holder. There's a lot of reference to the homeowners association enforcing this. What happens if the development does not have a homeowners association?
So as part of the ordinance and any development that comes in, it's required that the HOA be established as part of the development.
a lot of the homeowner associations around here now are very opposed. A lot of the residents are opposed to them, and they don't believe they're doing a lot of good.
So all new development will still have an operation and maintenance agreement. We will be requiring that if it's just a single commercial lot that has a site, they will also have an operation. They won't have to worry about the escrow. The escrow applies to shared devices, whether it be a residential association or some type of commercial association. But all devices still will be subject to the ordinance and require an operation and maintenance agreement. Those that are shared, though, would have that escrow, but all devices will have an operation and maintenance agreement and be responsible. The O&M, that operation and maintenance agreement, outlines the maintenance responsibility of just the property owner, the underlying property owner, when it's not in a shared device situation.
And Mr. Holder, if I may, just to make sure it's clear, there is nothing in this ordinance that requires every development that comes into the town of Clayton to establish a homeowners association. That is, if they do, then there are specific stormwater requirements. If they don't, then there are different specific stormwater requirements for operations maintenance of, that there's nothing about this ordinance that is a requirement that any development that now is set up in the town of Clayton has to be an HOA development.
All right, any other questions? All right, so are we going to hold off until we get some clarification on, or are we clear on the intent of the legality aspect of that, or where are we?
You mean in regards to the section that Mr. Granis raised a question on in regards to, I believe that we are clear on it. Again, if we go back and see there's a non-substantive language change that we need to make, we can do that. As I said, like a Scrivener's error change, but that is certainly at the will of the council if they are comfortable with that.
Okay. All right. Anyone else wish to speak on this? If not, we'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the council for their discussion. Mr. Granis.
Motion that we adopt ordinance number 2020-11-01.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the adoption of ordinance 2020-11-01. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. All right, up next on the public hearing is an update to the comprehensive list of fees and charges, stormwater erosion control. Turn it back over to Joshua.
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, taking on these programs certainly is going to require considerable staff time. Staff are proposing fees for both the erosion control and the stormwater programs that will help offset those costs to the town. Tonight, there's fees associated with both of those. In developing these fees, staff had two goals, and that was to have a simple structure that's understandable, that can be utilized across all different types of projects, and is easy to account for and manage. And then the other part is align with other jurisdictions, including Johnston County. Keep in mind that currently developers and builders are paying these fees just currently to Johnston County. This is not going to be necessarily any new type of fee that development and builders would be subject to. It is just simply transition it to the town and not a new. So we're going to jump into the slides, and Susan's going to kind of just give us a rundown of summary of the fees and compare to some other local jurisdictions.
So I think you guys have hopefully seen what we're proposing. So I'll just run through a little bit here. This first slide is just a summary for the erosion control, which includes plan review, subsequent plan reviews. We're hoping to get it right and approved within 2 cycles. If not, we're proposing a resubmittal fee, a revision fee. So I'll explain that a little bit. So what I anticipate, if we have a site that has a revision that we can make on the ground in the field during an inspection because something's not working, we have the ability to mark the plans and initial on site and move on. This fee is geared more towards a pretty significant change to the plans. From my past experience, I really don't anticipate seeing that very often, but we wanted to capture it just in case. And then we have, so again, we separated out plan review and permits. We look at them as 2 different things. We want to look at them as 2 different things. Not every municipality and jurisdictional body does that, and you'll see that a little bit later. So from a permitting perspective, I think the 2 years, it falls in line with the other permits validity that the town issues. So we're proposing $125 an acre. A renewal fee, so permit expires in 2 years. If they're still active under that permit, then they would be required to come in and pay for an extension for an additional year. And then we've also proposed a single family per lot fee. So what I've got up here is I've tried to capture some of the jurisdictions, what their review fee is. So again, plan review fee and a permit fee. Johnston County does not currently issue a separate permit. So their permit fee is captured as part of their plan review. So there's this $330 per acre. They have a 10-acre tier. They cut it off at 10 acres, and then every additional acre beyond that is $110. You can see there, Wake County, they do their plan review and their permit are the same at $250 an acre. Fuquay is the same. Wake Forest, they list theirs as a permit, kind of opposite of what Johnston does, so they don't issue a plan review fee. They capture theirs with their permit. Raleigh, I can't explain those numbers. And then you'll see highlighted at the bottom what we're proposing. So again, we tried to break it out, but mirror Johnston County as best we could at $225 and $125. That's your erosion control, active construction. So then what we did is we broke that down and we applied it to a project. So if somebody comes in Johnston County for a 10-acre site, what is that fee going to look like for them? So what you see there, you've got the plan review fee for each jurisdiction, their erosion control permit, and then, I don't know if you can read those, hopefully you guys have it in your notes, but in the ones that are starred to the left, the builders obtain individual permits and they pay the same fees as the developer based on the acreage disturbed. So I've captured that there, and then the right-hand column, you'll see what those totals would look like for a 10-acre site in any of those jurisdictions. And then we bumped it up to 15, same thing. So what the difference you see there in some of it is Johnston County, if you remember, had the break point at 10 acres. So everything up to 10 acres was the same. You kick it in over 10 acres, you get a little bit of a break in that fee because you're only paying 110 instead of 330 per acre. I put these up here because I want you guys, I'm an advocate for the single family lots having grading permits or erosion control permits, and this is why. The two on the left are in the same development. The builder came in, he sodded 50 feet off the back of the house and left that slope. The one on the bottom, you can see the ditch that's formed and discharging all that sediment into a roadside ditch. And then on the right-hand side, it's a complaint that we received about a month ago. somebody's backyard, the deposit there, the plume there of sediment is on their neighbor's yard. So the neighbor called, wanted to know what we could do about that. I feel like we should have had it stabilized before the builder sold it, and then we wouldn't be fielding that call here in town. So here's the stormwater summary. Again, we pretty much mirrored the erosion control. We've got a plan review, subsequent reviews, a revision fee, and then the permits. It's a little bit harder to capture some of the jurisdictions here, and some of that is because stormwater fees in some jurisdictions are captured as development fees, and they're not specifically called out to be stormwater. So I've compared Johnston and Wake. So again, Johnston County, what our current developers are paying today is $935 per acre, up to 10 acres, and then $90 for each additional acre above that for a residential plan. And then they also have it broken down for commercial, which is the same, initial $935, but the break point is 5 acres. Wake County, their residential is pretty straightforward. It's $500 an acre for their plan review. Under their permit, it's actually $150 for residential. And then where you see the $250 to $485, they actually have about a 3 or 4 tier system depending on your disturbance as to what your fee is for that development. So, and you'll see at the bottom what we proposed. Again, trying to match Johnston's, we did put a break point in there because we felt like we needed to do that to kind of at least mirror a little bit of what they're paying. So again, here's a 10-acre residential site based on those fees and where we are compared to what's currently out there in Johnston and Wake counties. 15-acre site. And then here's a commercial site. So one thing I want to point out with commercial sites, typically what we're going to see with commercial sites is you're going to see we might see a large tract of land come in with a commercial development, but if the parcels are big enough, we're not going to see a stormwater plan for that large tract. We're going to capture that as they come in and build that, Zaxby's or whatever. That smaller site is going to be paid for individually if it's a standalone site. So I wanted to point that out because I don't know that we'll see large commercial sites that will be subject to this at this level. So there's a 10-acre site. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. I'm just saying that there's a chance that it'll go the other way. And with that,
So
questions?
a comment as you guys go to questions. We looked at this as staff. I will try to get this to you guys as soon as possible or have them get to you. I know you may not be ready to move on it tonight, or you may be. But I thought a couple of things that I asked staff to do, and I may have messed up in some of this, but I'll take blame if it's bad. If it's good, I'll give them credit. But I wanted to simplify. I thought that having multiple tiers where developers and staff and you guys could understand it was bad, so try to simplify as much as possible. I also tried to make sure staff looked at this fairly. We needed to stay close to Johnston County, but on my advice, I said we also need to look at Wake County and other people discharging in the Neuse Basin and communities like us. And we don't need the most expensive, but we don't need to sit here and be the cheapest either. We need to get a fair return. And so they have done their best with my instructions to find the fair number, which ultimately belongs to you guys. But I think they've done a good job. And they've done the benchmarking that you guys like to see. And just whenever you guys are ready to act on it, we will, or we'll come back and bring you more information. So just wanted to add that before you guys got into questions.
Anyone else wishing to speak? If not, I'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the council for their discussion. Mr. Bunn.
First off, I'd like to thank the staff for going back and you know how I feel about the benchmarking. And I feel good about the numbers now because I know that was up in the air if we felt like they were just being pulled out of the air. But now I feel really good about the numbers, and I'm actually ready to move on this if everybody else is tonight.
Good. Anyone else? Mr. Granis?
I agree with Councilman Bunn. I think you guys have done a good job here. When I first looked at this, there were a couple of areas where I was thinking, I'm not so sure about that. But the more I got into it, and then after the presentation, I mean, I feel good. And it's obvious to me that you've spent time on this and you've done what I consider to be more than appropriate research. And I really appreciate that.
Else? All right, well, if you're ready to move forward, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, if I may jump in, apologies. I believe this has been noticed as a public hearing, which I think you said early on, so we might make sure, which seems a little silly seeing there's no one in the chambers, but make sure there's no one to speak and then close the public hearing and then take council action for the record.
I believe I just did that, if I'm not having an ACU relapse.
Then I am. Apologies.
Okay. No, thank you for being there to look after me. That's what you're here for. Thank you, Catherine. All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Granis.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance number 2020-11-02.
Second. We have a motion and a second for adoption of the ordinance. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, up next under old business is the equipment lease purchase agreement for the fire truck.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Tonight we're asking council to approve a technical correction to a resolution that you approved back on October 5th. The resolution that was approved on October 5th reflected the town entering into a finance agreement with Freedom Financial. Since then, we discovered that although Freedom Financial presented the financing proposal, that the actual agreement was with Community First National Bank. So there's no differences in the terms, the interest rate, or the purchase price. We still have a prepayment savings of $49,000. Claytex is cash flow and 50% up front, and the other 50% is coming from the financing proceeds. So we're prepaying the full purchase price of this up front, same way it's presented back on October 5th. No changes.
Just a minor adjustment with the naming. All right, questions for Robert? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we adopt resolution 2020-42.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for adoption of the resolution. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Up next is an amendment to the Library Advisory Board bylaws.
Hey, Mayor and Council, I'm Joy Garrettson, Library Director. In your packet, you should have our cover sheet, information about the amendment we'll want to make to the library bylaws. Our library board has recommended that we change the wording in our bylaws to about how often the board meets, and approving this will allow us to have bi-monthly meetings, not necessarily monthly meetings, and it just gives us a little more flexibility for the meeting schedule. This will help us, we hope, attract some more board members and also just have a little bit more flexibility with our schedule. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments for Joy? All right. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt resolution 2020-43.
Second.
A second for adoption of the resolution 2020-43. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, up next is the update to the bank signature cards, operating account, and Clayton Fire, Claytex Fire District.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Tonight we have two resolutions that have to do being triggered by the upcoming retirement of Deputy Town Manager Nancy Medlin. The first resolution, 2020-44, is removing Nancy and adding Rich Capola as having a signature authority or counter signature authority on the town accounts. The second resolution, 2020-45, is related to the who has signature authority for the Claytex Fire District. In this particular resolution, Nancy's being removed and Rich Capola as Deputy Town Manager and myself are being added.
All right, questions or comments for staff? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we adopt resolution 2020-44.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the adoption of resolution 2020-44. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I also make a motion, we adopt resolution 2020-45.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for adoption of resolution 2020-45. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is the recommendation advisory board appointments.
Yes, recently we have, we advertised for the positions that are coming up on our various advisory boards, and tonight we would like to present recommendations for 3 of those boards. For Public Art Advisory, we are recommending that there be 3 reappointments of Kim Helmer, Tammy Murray, and Clark Hippolito. All 3 of those positions would be 3-year terms, so they would all expire in December of 2023. For the Planning Board, there are 3 appointments, 2 of them being reappointments, and that would be Stephen Powers, and he is an in-town position, and that would be for a 3-year term. Marty Bizzle is a reappointment, and that would be for an ETJ position, also a 3-year term. And then a new appointment for an ETJ position of Lisa Begley, and that would also be a 3-year term. For Parks and Recreation, we have 4 appointments, 3 of those being reappointments, and those 3 reappointments are Butch Lauder, Gina Guerrera, and Rebecca Bradford. All 3 of those, again, would be 3-year terms. And then the final is a new appointment, and that is for John Salupo, and that would be a 3-year term expiring in 12 of 23 as well. Interviews were completed by staff liaison and council liaison for all the boards. It is anticipated additionally that in December, we will come back with recommendations for both the library and fire advisory. And those recommendations are presented for possible appointment.
All right, any questions or comments for the clerk? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion to appoint those noted to the advisory boards as presented.
So move.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next one is the code ordinance update, chapter 50, time of collection regarding the system development fees.
Mayor, council, before you is an update to Chapter 50 based on some recent legislation. This legislation basically changes the timing of when the system development fees are due. We have updated, staff has updated the Chapter 50 from requiring the FDS at plat recordation to just align with the specific statute. So we reference the actual statute and just fall in line with what that reads. For House Bill 873 reads the time of application for a building permit. So this would be just transitioning the timing of the SDS from plat to building permit. We have updated everything and it's before you tonight. We would ask for motion for this to be implemented beginning January 1, 2021. That's not in the cover sheet, but we would ask for January 1, 2021. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
All right, questions or comments for Joshua? All right, being none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we adopt ordinance 2020-11-03.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the adoption of the ordinance 2020-11-03. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Hey, Joshua, we got our money's worth out of you tonight.
3 times.
All right, thank you. Moving right along under staff reports, beginning with the town manager.
Couple things. I'll start with bad news first, but I'll make it good news. And that is to recognize Nancy Medlin for her service. That I knew Nancy when Steve Biggs was first hired. He hired Nancy to come in and do the finances. And I remember it was Steve and Nancy and Skip Browder doing the planning and Tim Simpson doing the engineering. And that's been a long time ago. But Nancy's been a very loyal public servant to the town and to the state. And I say it's good news because few of us make it 31 years, over 31 years of service and have the impact. So thank you, Nancy, on that for all you've done for Clayton. Other good news I want to give you, and I'm going to read you a list. There's only one other piece of good news I give you tonight. Terry Johnson, Eileen Fogler, Carlos Terry Williams, those are 2 meter readers, Holly Franks, Ann Warren, Sherry Smith, and Emily Lawhorn. That's Ann Games Customer Service Department. And why do I pick them tonight is because about 60 days ago, about 2 weeks into my tenure, we came to the COVID stuff, $400,000 in the hole, and we had to get money back. And Ann had told Nancy, but they told me, do we go get the money or not? And I said, go get our money. And one factoid, I didn't want to jinx it. I wanted to get out 60 days. I have not received one complaint to the manager's office about cutting people's water off and collecting our money. And I think we're somewhere probably close to only writing about $8,000 or $10,000 off total. We had one big franchise chain development, you say, that Ann came to me and said, we got to cut off. They're going to squawk JD. It never got to my office. Never got to my office. So I just don't know how to say much more about what customer service should be and working with people, because cutting their power and their water and their electricity off is a horrible thing for most people, but we have found a way to collect money. And I think what Nancy would tell you, because Nancy cuts some of this down when it gets really bad, and Ann does, but we couldn't do it, Ann, without your team. And you've really got a great team. I think on my way down the hall this afternoon, I think Holly Franks collected $15,000 today just by herself. And again, not one call to the town manager. So I want to recognize that group of people for all the good things they've done, and for Ann, for your team and all you've done too. That's an incredible statistic that we've gotten to. The other thing I'll add, just business-wise, 4 things here real quick. Robert is doing a great job with us on the budget. We have the budget, per our current budget, we've got to review that mid-year. So what we're doing now with Robert's and I are doing, and Robert's team, is to go through and try to get as much of expenses together and contract amounts as we can. We've been looking at revenue and costs since my tenure here. In December, we're going to start rotating and really look at the budget. And a couple things there is how much have we actually spent, but how much can we spend? And what Robert and I have agreed upon is to look at almost start the next budget now What we don't want staff to do is to say, I can deliver, because they're afraid of losing their budget. Let's be honest and figure out what we can spend, and then go ahead and start building next year's budget with the carryover work, instead of waiting until April or May and say, oh, we really couldn't do that. Or having $1.5 million of carryover like we did this year. Let's figure out what that is in advance and get that done. So we'll be bringing you some more information as we get into December, and hopefully that December 21st meeting will have you some information to let you know where we stand relative to budget. I'm not sure I've passed it to you, but we have broken another sales receipt record again last month. So we found that out late last week, and I need to share that with you guys. So our revenues keep going up, but as we've talked about, our costs and our requests for services are continuing to climb too. So we've got to look at that harder. The other thing that we are activating, and it's something we talked about last week, but we have canceled the Christmas parties. We were going to have small group Christmas parties of 25 people. Delisha, Jeffra, Rich, and I all decided last week that it was, Nancy was not in, but we needed to pull the plug on those and rehab those in the March timeframe. There will also be some things that we decided to work on today, kind of like this meeting right here, trying to restrict the number of people in this room, although we have an exemption. But just to make people more conscious of, we do have an outbreak in Johnston County. We are a hot spot now. And from now until the week after December 4th, I believe, after people gather for a week, we're going to try to stay with what we're doing, but really screw it down. Any unnecessary meetings, we're not having them. Where we can Zoom again, we're going to Zoom. We may send some departments to A and B schedules. We're still open for business. We're still providing the service. We're still peaking in what we have to deliver, just like you guys are in some of your business. But we really need to try to make, in my opinion, the holidays a time where we can kind of catch our breath and make sure we just it's a good time to catch our breath. And so that's what we're trying to do for the next couple of weeks. But nothing radical where you guys need to activate on policy. It's just really sharpening a little bit of what we're doing now. I'll share some exciting stuff. I think you guys have heard me. We are having some opportunities in the Parks and Rec side. I met with some of the school board people and the principal, Clayton High School. So not just now with some stuff we're talking about with Civitans, but the Y, but some unique partnerships we may be looking at. I'm not going to give you the details yet. We're still working through that kind of at a staff level. But as we get that ready for the political people and mature those over the next couple of weeks, we may have some good opportunities. So just share that. I would never thought Parks and Rec would have been such a big thing right now, given what we're in, but we do see some opportunities, and I think it will be good for our community when we look at our ball fields and our playing surfaces. So more on that. Last thing I'll add is we were going to do it this week. Rich and his staff were ready to put signs up. Last year, y'all approved a four-way sign at Blanche and Barber Street, kind of in conjunction with the parking lot. We want to go ahead and do that. Rich came forward and said it's time to do that because we will have some traffic back there. I believe we have talked to the residences on the corner, and to the best of my knowledge, everybody still wants the four-way stop. You guys have approved it, but I didn't want to say go do it or approve doing it officially until we ran it by everybody tonight and the public could hear that we do intend to put the four-way stop on Blanche and Barber. So I just run that by you, and you guys can give me comments if there's any exceptions that you guys may have. But you have approved it before, I believe. Yes, Councilman Martin.
I think that's a great idea. But with that being said, there's one other intersection in this town that's starting to really flare up pretty bad. And the mayor can speak on it, and Mr. Grannis can too. And that's going to be Smith Street and 2nd. Okay. Had another wreck last week. I noticed this morning that the stop sign is kind of positioned behind a utility pole.
Okay.
I know we talked about rumble strips, but first snow we have, we're going to destroy those. Is there any way to put one of those solar flashing lights on there, just on that one particular sign? I know last week we had another wreck there.
Okay.
And it's starting to be a really bad intersection.
And again, I'll say this, Rich, I think we can look at that. Josh was here too. We can look at that and see. And the same thing I tried to give you on the power poles on Glen Laurel Road. We'll try to look and see how that one compares to some other intersections and then come back with some solutions that we can do something to help that, because we don't want accidents. So we'll look at that one.
And one other thing I'd like to bring up is the speeding on Fayetteville Street. I know when I go down Fayetteville Street at 8 o'clock going towards Raleigh in the mornings, it's pretty fast. And I notice our police officers are out on 70 out past Walmart clocking traffic. So if we could tweak the police to kind of watch the school zones for us a little bit during those times, that would be pretty awesome.
I'll do that and report back to you as well.
I could be wrong, wouldn't be the first time, but I believe, and I don't know why it's hitting me, but I believe that one of the discussions with the neighborhood regarding the expansion of the parking lot, did it not also include Blanche Street and Fayetteville Street as a four-way stop?
We talked about that. We did talk about
Because that is literally the first one that came to my mind, and then I read tonight it's Blanche Street and Barber Street, which is definitely another one without question because of the dip of the terrain and all of that. But I honestly thought, and we could pull the meeting minutes or whatever, but I thought we as a council gave concern to that particular spot of the intersection, especially with, you know, how schools are now and the closeout, the turnout times are earlier and people are parking on the southbound side waiting to turn into Clayton High School, and they're parking on the northbound side trading to turn into Clayton High School. So I think that particular intersection is something that rings a bell as we go back to talking with the neighborhood about expanding this parking lot. That was definitely an intersection of concern, because once you cross the stop sign here at 2nd and Fayetteville, it's just a free shot to Highway 70. So I think, I could be wrong, but I would like for us to check into that.
Kimberly will check the minutes, and Rich, do you have any memory of that? But we're definitely going to check the minutes, but go ahead, Rich.
What does it take to do that?
Well, and I believe that's where we're at. I believe we have to do some additional further study. That was a much more higher traffic road, and I believe the Kimberly Horne study did not fully evaluate that based on some of the treatments that were being requested. We can certainly go back and pull that, and if we have to get the traffic engineers to review that information again and give us a recommendation, we can do that as well.
Because that would slow that traffic down on Fayetteville Street tremendously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not something that it may take us a couple months to do that, but certainly by first of the year, sometime in January, we can have that evaluated and have a plan moving for that.
Which would be great.
Okay.
Anything else from you, JD?
Councilman Granis?
Oh, Mr. Granis.
Say a couple of words with respect to South Smith and East 2nd. My wife and I live on that corner, and I could be very wrong, but I feel very confident that for the last 10 years, we've had a minimum of one accident a year at that intersection, and I can attest to multiple near misses.
Okay.
I even rendered aid on 2 different occasions to people who were injured in accidents at that corner.
Okay.
So it's well worth investigating.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And that's our street.
Yes, it is.
You know, exactly, which makes it even better. All right. Anyone else? All right, Town Attorney.
Mr. Mayor, no report, but I do need to request from the council that we have a brief closed session at the appropriate time for purposes of consultation with the town attorney to maintain privilege.
All right, and will we be allowed to stay in here, or will we have to go somewhere?
We're going to go up to 223?
Yes.
23?
Apparently my mic's sometimes working and not others.
I understand, don't worry. Thank you. All right, any other staff? Ms. Angame?
Good evening, council and mayor. It's Thank you for the kind words, JD. I really appreciate it for that staff. They work very hard. What I wanted to bring before you tonight is exactly what I talked about the last time I was here, but I wanted you to see where we're getting pledges from and donations from for our utility customers that are in need. We do receive pledges from Johnston County Social Services, and of course, Johnston Lee Harnett Community Action is the organization that's managing the funds that the governor released recently for the NC Hope and the NC Cares program. And they're two separate programs. The Cares program is a more critical, more crisis program. The NC Hope program was established for people who are renters, and it's to avoid evictions and to pay rent for them, but it also has an element of utility payments in there. So we are getting money from both of those. We're getting promises of money so far from both of those programs. One Compassion is the philanthropic arm of 127 Homes, and they have been extremely generous with some of our utility customers in the town. St. Anne's Catholic Church also got CARES money, so we're seeing donations from them on behalf of customers. And Clayton Area Ministries is not doing donations for utility bills, but we do still refer people to them because they provide food bank, food situations, and also clothing. I understand they do. That's kind of been their focus for the last year. But I just wanted to share this with you so you would have in writing who we are referring people to if they cannot pay their utility bills. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments? Mr. Granis.
And I just want to thank you and your team for the job that you guys are doing. I'm echoing J.D. Solomon's comments. To be subjected to the types of jobs that your folks are doing, I know has got to be strenuous in itself. But to produce the results that you and your team are producing, I think is truly phenomenal. And I just want to be sure that you get acknowledged for that, and your team does as well.
Thank you. I'll pass it along to all of them.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, I'll now turn the floor over for informal discussion and public comment.
I believe Mr. Weiss is here for public comment.
Hey, thanks again. I wanted to bring you guys up to some attention on something I just found out recently. So I live in the Highgate subdivision that's handled by Wakefield Development. And we had our second HOA meeting virtual about a week ago. And the discussion came around, when were they going to continue to start the greenways in our neighborhood? And as you know, part of the approval process is that they put the greenways in as per the plan and all the things that happen. So we found out that they are actually going to start. And then I asked a couple of questions from Haley Hogue, and Haley's done a wonderful job, as well as Joshua, in helping us to understand as a group where this is going. Originally, just to give you a little background information, originally in 2018 when we bought in there, they all said, hey, by the way, you know, there's going to be this trail, it's going to connect with another trail, and you're going to be able to walk all the way to Neuse River. And then to confirm all that, I spoke with Dave early last year, and he said the same thing on the telephone. In today's world, we're finding out that that's not the case. So what I wanted to do was share with you all, it may not be apparent to everybody, but if we could maybe form a task force or some type of group that could investigate what it would take to either utilize the current sewer easement, and Joshua's real familiar with that was designated through MIM's property, and or going through another direction, which is a gentleman who owns a piece of property on 168 Liberty. Haley's got that address and everything platted out. We're literally talking about yards of property line in between the Parkview Trail and the Highgate Greenway Trail. So that would enable approximately, at Highgate, there's about 263 homes, so let's just say 500 to 600 residents Cassadale would have the ability to walk through the neighborhood and also utilize that trail, helping to flow and put together a more continuous greenway project. But when you look at the map, there is a sliver of property that goes between Parkview and Highgate, and it literally may be no more than 100 yards, if that much. So I know there's some things in legally eminent domain and all this stuff that goes with all that. I know it's not easy, but if we could maybe formulate some type of task force within our group, however that's done, let's at least explore the idea that can we join these two trails, greenways that have been put together at great cost, and just see if they could meet up and allow people to be able to enjoy it even more, make it a nicer thing for the whole community.
And Mr. Weiss, I appreciate that. And a couple of these we're already looking at.
Okay.
And so I do like the idea of a task force. I do like the idea that we connect these as much as possible. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to see with any discretionary money we have in our budget, if there's ways we can do that.
Yeah.
And I know Joshua and Haley have been helpful. The other thing that I will add to council as a whole and everybody as a whole is, as we've looked at several of these trail projects, the trails were something we have been doing for a while now as kind of an afterthought. I hate to say it, that's my word, maybe the bad word, but it's on the plans, but there's really not a schedule. And if developer moves from phase A to phase B or phase 1 to phase 2, we don't always enforce building that trail. And one of the things we've tried to work with Haley and Samantha and Joshua and Rich is to get a little bit better definition on don't go to phase whatever without finishing the trail that's on the plans. And so that's just growing pains, and we're going to do our best, but we will try to connect the trails the best we can.
I like I said, I really appreciate the effort. If it could come to fruition, I know it would make a lot of people happy to be able to have access that way without driving, and with just walking around would be great. One other quick question, if I could ask, on as is being built next to Legends Park, the new trail that's going in there, is there anything beyond that subdivision that's going to enable a sidewalk to go all the way up the street, up City Road to the cemetery for those folks? Or is it actually, does the sidewalk and greenway area stop right there at that new crosswalk that's going to go in?
Right now, what we're trying to do is take it up to the right field of Civitan Park, or the Civitan right field, bring it through a project we're working on right now, to bring it through the municipal park as part of that project, and then bring it on down through Stalling Street to connect to downtown.
Great.
So I don't think we're maybe going on the same track you are, but it is the intent to connect that nice $3.1 million trail by the Legend Field on around through the municipal park and then back on Stalling Street to downtown.
Fantastic.
So
Okay, thank you very much.
We're working on that as we speak. But thank you. Those are great comments.
Appreciate it. Thank you again.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, up next is council comments, and I'm going to go first quickly, then I'll get to you, Mr. Holder. But at this time, I would like to ask Nancy Medlin to please stand at her desk. Please rise. Please stand for your sentencing. On behalf of the town of Clayton, we find you guilty of 3 of the following charges. 1, contributing to the overall success of the town of Clayton. 2, giving of your time and talent to our financial health and well-being. And 3, putting Clayton and its citizens first and foremost in your daily job. Finding you guilty of all 3 counts, we sentence you to a wonderful, healthy lifetime of retirement. And we want you to know publicly, as this evening is your last meeting in attendance as Deputy Town Manager, how truly grateful we are and how wonderful it will be for you to come and visit Clayton and to know that you made a difference here and there and everywhere. And on behalf of the town of Clayton, we thank you for your service. Have you ever been sentenced before?
Not lately.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to be the first.
Yeah, my mic is working. So I don't have to come up there. So, it's been a good ride. It's been 22 years and change. Been here a long time, seen a lot of changes. When I started, we were in the old town hall. Population was probably around 4,000-ish. And so I've seen a lot of things happen. And I'm proud to have been a part of them. I've worked with some of the greatest people on the planet.
Yes.
And that's the hardest part. Because I will miss them. But thank you.
And we're going to miss you too. But we're excited for the future,
I'm excited. My husband and I bought a motor home in March, and we're going to do some traveling. We want to travel across the U.S. and see some of the contiguous 48.
Nice.
We may even get up to Alaska, but we're excited about that.
That's wonderful. Well, we wish you all the best, Nancy, and
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, any other comments, Mr. Holder?
One comment I want to make, JD, the sea trail up by Lionsgate over to the Clayton Center, Recreation Center, that bridge there has been blocked off for several months now. Is there a reason for that?
Not to be smart, but it's unsafe. So we are working to try to get that bridge back into a condition that would be open back up. And I think Joshua Rich could say more, but I think that's the long and the short of it, is we're working on that right now to have that done. I don't think it was nearly built to the standard that we would build it today, nor the condition that would last a long time. So, gentlemen, anything to add to that, or is that a fair assessment of where we're at?
Yep, we're working with the HOA for Lionsgate. Technically, that's their bridge. Technically, that bridge is owned by the HOA. So we've been working to try to come up with a workable solution to make that a long-term viable pathway.
All right, anyone else? All right. Well, if there's nothing else to come before us, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session after a 15-minute break or until the mayor shows up, whichever comes first.
So moved. Second.
Favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. There's no further business to come before this council. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Good night.